Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Google Pixel 5 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, there are still some features and some advantages of buying something like the Pixel 5, and honestly, even if you plan on buying another device or you plan on upgrading from this thing, it still might be worth it to keep this phone around, and I'll explain all that throughout this video. The first thing to keep in mind though, the Google Pixel 5 came out back in 2020. Now, this was a very interesting time from Google because they had a couple of different choices. So they basically made this phone, they made the Pixel 4 and 4 XL before this, and I just felt like those phones weren't really that great. They were competing with, the main flagships of that time, and 2019 was a really good phone, a year for a lot of other phones except for the Pixels. So Google with the Pixel 5 ended up kind of combating against what they were doing before, and instead of making like a super big flagship phone, they actually instead made kind of like a mid-tier phone that was actually pretty good for the price that you were paying. So the Pixel 5 wasn't supposed to be a flagship phone at the time. It was supposed to be like a good mid-tier phone, and I'm glad they made this because they were actually able to go and put their heads down, probably get some more funding for their Pixels, and create the Pixel 6, which I think was a really good direction for Google to go down, and I'm very, very happy with the way they've made their phones since then. But that was an interesting thing that happened during the Pixel 5 time. Now on the front of the Pixel 5, we have that 6-inch OLED display. It's a 90Hz panel, and overall it's a pretty good panel. It's 1080p, you're getting that hole punch display in the top left corner, and the design of this phone, at least on the front, still looks pretty good. It still looks like a pretty good looking phone. There isn't that much to hate on when you're getting a phone like this because the panel itself, although it's not the best 1440p curved display like we have on the S23 Ultra, you're still getting a pretty good looking phone, and I still feel like a phone like the Pixel 5 on the front looks very nice. The only things, maybe if it had a 120Hz display, maybe a little bit bigger of a display, but beyond that, it's still a very, very good looking phone on the front. Getting that USB Type-C port on the bottom of this phone, which is great. And on the sides of this phone, you're getting this kind of like curved side to it a little bit. That was pretty popular at that time. It's like curved but kind of flat. It's kind of like hard to explain a little bit, but it's still a very good looking phone nonetheless. And that is a very, very good looking thing about this particular device is that, it still looks pretty good. On the back side, you're getting this like aluminum build. So this was the thing that was kind of going on with this phone that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I feel like the build of this phone doesn't feel as good as some other devices that came out in 2020, even phones that came out in 2019. I feel like the Nexus 4 felt great, and I feel like the Pixel 6 and all the other Google phones since then have felt very, very good. The Pixel 5 didn't feel super expensive, which maybe isn't what Google was going for at the time. I do like basically everything else about this phone, but this device from that perspective, from the build quality, at least on the backside, doesn't really look amazing in my opinion, but it still looks great. It just doesn't feel that good as you probably expect. You're still getting wireless charging on this phone. You're still getting dual camera setup on the back. Lots and lots of good stuff going on with this phone, which is very exciting. So without a doubt, I would tell you on the outside, it's still a very good phone in a majority of different ways. And this is a phone that I would look at and I'd be like, okay, this is a very, very good device. It's not perfect, but I do think for the most part, it's a very good phone. Now, I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest advantages and features of this phone, there was actually two of them in my opinion. One is having that Snapdragon chipset, which we'll talk about in a second. But two, it's actually the fact that this phone had one particular cool feature that a lot of people probably forgot about. This phone actually had the capability of actually giving you unlimited Google Photo storage. So this is something that's genuinely very cool. So the reason why this is so cool in my opinion is because this type of phone was actually giving you essentially unlimited storage on Google Photos for your photos. So if you wanted to, you could just go ahead and just, basically, drag and drop all your photos inside of this and essentially go ahead and, back up all your photos on here completely for free. Personally, for me, I actually do end up paying for storage every month. I think it's like, I pay like $1 a month or something like that. But that is kind of annoying probably. And if you have a ton of photos, you're probably going to, suck up even more storage than that. So the fact that this one had this type of capability at that time was actually very cool. So I know some people who actually could actually buy a Pixel 5 and just drag and drop your photos into this, particular phone and essentially just go ahead and back up all your photos into this device. So you have the type of capability right there, which is genuinely awesome. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the camera side of things, this phone had that dual camera setup on the back side. So it had a 12.2 megapixel camera on the back with a 16 megapixel wide angle lens. And you were also essentially getting that 8 megapixel front facing camera. Now you were getting 4K on the back side, which was good. And you were, getting 1080p on the front, which is not anything insane. It's a pretty average camera kind of when it comes down to it, to be honest, nowadays. but at that time, it was actually a pretty decent camera. And that was, once again, a pretty good advantage of getting a phone like this, because you were actually able to go ahead and once again have a phone that was giving you a pretty decent camera for like not that much money, which was something that was actually very, very cool and very exciting to have. Pixels notoriously never had like the best camera of that year, but they finally gave us an ultra-wide camera this year, which I was very excited about. And that again is a very cool advantage with this particular device. So that kind of covers it up there. Now in terms of software and longevity, this is a pretty cool advantage of this phone too, because Google Pixels last a very long amount of time. And with a device like the Pixel 5, this device started off with Android 11 and it did go all the way up to Android 14. So this was something that was actually very cool. And having a phone like this, again, I'm very, very happy about and very excited about, because this phone had a long-lasting software behind it. Unfortunately, this is kind of an issue. When you are getting something like the Google Pixel 5, you are getting a phone that may not be getting another version of software. So this is kind of an issue when you're getting a device like this, once again, because I don't feel like, I don't want to recommend a phone people to buy if it's not going to be supported with software or if it's going to have issues. Now, this phone is not going to have issues per se, but it probably will end up not giving you the longest lasting support of software for a long period of time. And that's just what happens when you're getting devices like this, is that they're just not going to be supported for that much longer. So once again, if you're getting something like the Galaxy S20, if you're getting something like the Google Pixel 5, it's not going to last something like the Galaxy S24 or the Pixel 8 Pro or Pixel 9 that comes out this year. Like, just one of those things to keep in mind. But regardless, still a very good phone, still a fan of it, and I love Android and I love the Pixels. Now in terms of performance, this was actually a reason why I kind of liked the Pixel 5 for at least like 2 years after this phone came out, and it was because of that chipset. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 765G chipset inside of this phone with the 8GB of RAM, it wasn't the best performing chipset of that time, but it was actually a decent chipset for what you were getting at that moment. The thing that I liked about this chipset though was the fact that you were actually getting a Snapdragon chipset on a Pixel. I love Google Pixels and I love Snapdragon, and when they switched over to their Tensor chipset, now it's kind of good. But at that time, I kind of had an issue with it because we were actually getting a device that wasn't the best in terms of the performance at that moment. I feel like a lot of other phones were so much better and a lot of applications weren't optimized for the Tensor chipset. So I liked actually having that Snapdragon chipset at that moment because you were actually getting, the same kind of equivalence of like a Samsung phone for the most part, even though this was not as good of a, chipset at that time. It was still, I think, better than the Tensor chipset of that moment. So I will tell you, the performance of the Pixel 5 is still fairly good. You're still getting a very good, performance for the most part. And once again, there's not really a lot to complain about here. These types of phones last very long in terms of performance, in terms of software. So you can still get a very good, decent phone for the most part from this type of device, which is genuinely still very good. So to kind of sum up this video, what I'll definitely tell you is, I do think the Google Pixel 5 is still a very good phone to pick up. I still think this device has a lot of capability and a lot of quality. It's not a perfect device by any means, but I do think that if you're going to go ahead and buy a device, this is a very solid option. And once again, I'm a very big fan of the Google Pixel 5, but I will probably tell you there's better phones out there. I think the Pixel 7 in the used market is a very good phone. The Galaxy S23 in the used market is a very good phone too. And even an iPhone, like an iPhone 13, is probably a better option than this thing. So that's kind of what I tell you there, to be honest. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.